welcome to another Abundant Insight. I'm Carl Meyer, your host, and today we have Rusty Smith. Rusty is with the Center for Growth, and he's also a professional EOS implementer and a chair of the TAB, which is the Alternative Board. Known Rusty for a long time, and I look forward to talking to him about one of the client situations. And I think there's going to be some very interesting challenges as well as positive outcomes for this case study. So welcome, Rusty. Happy to have you here today and look forward to our discussion.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So you've got an interesting case study, a client that you worked with previously. How did you get connected to that client?
Well, it was actually a referral from a former client. You know, one of the things that I love to do is I love to keep in touch with my former clients, and I give them a call every few months, whether they want to hear from me or not. Anyway, so one of my former clients, I was having coffee with her, and she said, "There's somebody I need you to meet." And so I met him, and so we had a conversation, and we've been working together ever since.
Fantastic. And, what kind of space, without being too specific, what general area are they working in, and, what's the company look like?
It's a professional services type of company. They help companies with their outreach and marketing types of activities.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And so they had some kind of issue or concern, and that's why they got connected to you. Is that how it worked?
Well, when I originally met with the owner, we had coffee together, and he was frustrated with a lot of different things. One of the things is that they're a kind of a virtual company in many respects. Even though they have about 20, 25 employees, they mostly work from home, all of them. And this was way before COVID. This was probably 4 years ago, maybe even, when I started working with them. And it was started because a lot of them, have children, have childcare issues, and they've just always worked from home. And so he was having a really difficult time with having everybody on the same page, and communications, and all focus on the same priority and that sort of thing. And so he was frustrated with a lot of different aspects of the business, but probably that was the main thing that he was frustrated with.
Okay, that makes sense. And so as you started working with them, did you kind of see the same challenge once you kind of really got involved, or were there other things that came up?
Well, once I got involved with them, and I did my initial overview with him and his team, it became pretty clear that they really were all on the same page. They, when I asked about some of the strengths and weaknesses of the firm, it was all over the map. What they wanted to get out of the firm, it was all over the map. And so it wasn't just about communications. It was really about, all of them seeing the same vision and being headed in the same direction. So, so of course, something like that just permeates the whole organization, right? So, if you don't get everybody, with a shared vision, you're not going to go very far, right? Scalability was a challenge as well. They'd grown pretty quickly. And because they were kind of a virtual organization, it was really hard to maintain the culture that they had when they were smaller. And so that was a part of the challenge as well, is just how to scale a company like theirs. So,
absolutely. Yeah, I can see where that would be a challenge. So many companies are dealing with the virtual issue these days. So, more and more of an issue out there. So.
Yeah, the good news is that when COVID hit, they had no issue because they were already used to working virtual. So
we got this. That's right. So was that kind of, you talked about like the vision planning and getting everybody on the same page. Was that kind of your way to do an assessment of the company, or was there something else you did in that respect?
So I'm an EOS implementer, and so I was working with them on implementing EOS, and part of our process is to have an initial kind of 90-minute overview meeting with them. And so we did that And from that, some of those issues emerged. And I knew that once we got into the full implementation, that some of the issues that they're talking about were going to be addressed. And so, so we did an assessment with them as part of the program, and as expected, they were, again, all over the map. I hate using that term, but they really were, literally, because they were working virtually as well as figuratively, just where the business was headed. So.
Okay. So, but then you were able to kind of pull together that, 1-page summary of where we're trying to go. And
yeah, absolutely. And so once we got started on the process, I mean, it was pretty funny. After the first day, obviously, the first implementation day, the strategic planning day, they were exhausted, but they felt like they were more on the same page than they'd ever been. So,
that's great. So you were able to do that process in like one intense day.
Well, the way that I work with clients is that it's a series of planning meetings, and so that first day is the day that we really look at the structure of the organization. And we talked about what we call the accountability chart, which is kind of a organizational chart on steroids. It not only covers the structure but the roles of each person on the leadership team primarily, and then we push it down to the rest of the organization. And it was it was a little of a stressful situation. What we do is we start with our kind of our mantra, if you will, is structure first, people second, right? And so we kind of focus on, okay, given where the company is headed and what we need to deliver to our customers into the marketplace, what structure do we really need to have in the next 6 months and beyond, right? And so we don't really want to start with the existing organizational structure, because a lot of times there's some legacy stuff in there, and you've created roles around people and so on and so forth. And so we kind of laid out the organization, and one of the members of the leadership team, and as a matter of fact, she'd been with the founder since the beginning of the company, looked at the accountability chart and said, "I don't see a role for me on that chart." And so we had to have a difficult discussion about that. The owner wanted her to be on the leadership team, yet the role that was eventually decided for her was reporting to one of the other leaders on the leadership team. Good news is that she was happy with that, and it has evolved over time. And I can say now that she is back on the leadership team in a role that is important for the company, but it's very different from the role that she was initially in. So, but so that happens, right? Is mm-hmm. you create the organization that you need, and then you figure out, okay, who's going to sit in the right seats, right?
Right. Yeah, that's so critical. I've seen that so many times, and yeah, roles evolve and companies evolve. So that's excellent. Sounds like it's a very valuable exercise.
Yeah, it was stressful, obviously, for more so for them than for me. I'm the outside facilitator, if you will. But yeah, it was a difficult conversation, but a very fruitful and productive conversation, because it really got into who should be doing what, who is best at what, making sure that there's no gaps and overlaps in roles and responsibilities. And a lot of organizations don't do that. A lot of organizations have kind of grown around the people, and they aren't really optimized for scaling the business in a big way.
Right. No, it's an important exercise, and it's something to maintain as you go forward, because your company changes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, you mentioned facilitation. So now, did you facilitate or set up any management meetings? Were they already having some, or how did that work?
Yeah, part of our process is that we get them, when I start talking to companies and I ask about, the effectiveness of their meeting, we ask them to rate the effectiveness of their meetings on a scale of 1 to 10. And it's usually fairly low, right? One of the things that we teach them up front is how to have an effective management meeting. And we call it a level 10 meeting because we want it to, when they rate the meeting on a scale of 1 to 10, we want it to be a level 10 meeting. And so we ask the question, what does a level 10 meeting mean? Right? Well, it means that we're spending our time effectively, that we're solving problems, and that we're moving the company forward. And so I help them implement a weekly level 10 meeting, which is a 90-minute meeting. And at first it was like, a 90-minute meeting? What do you mean? We're already so busy. We don't have time for a 90-minute meeting every week. But, the structure of the meeting that we help them implement actually eliminates about a lot of other meetings during the week. Right. And so kind of the structure of the meeting is that we go through a scorecard review. We talk about what their quarterly objectives are. We call them rocks. And what the status of those are. We're reviewing any to-dos from the previous meeting. We talk about any customer employee headlines, and we get through all that in 25 minutes, right? And then we set aside the next 60 minutes to actually tackling issues. So we have them maintain a issues list of the problems that are going on in the company, the opportunities that they have, and they literally spend an hour every week doing nothing but solving problems in the company. And most leadership teams don't do that. They tend to solve the problems outside the meeting, or there's a bunch of hallway meetings, or there's a bunch of ad hoc one-on-one meetings. And most companies, we even have a process that we call IDS, identify, discuss, and solve, right? Most companies kind of sort of identify what their issues are. A lot of companies don't, but even the ones that do identify their issues they discuss and discuss and discuss and discuss and discuss and never solve. Well, our process says, okay, let's solve the meeting. What did we decide? What are the action items from it? And so what we tend to do then is we start to creep up from, being that level 2 meeting, if you will, to get towards being a level 10 meeting. And so most of our clients feel like this is the most effective part of our program is actually getting the leadership team talking to each other, solving problems, and moving the company forward.
Absolutely. I've seen similar impacts on a number of companies, and having an organized meeting, focused, is so powerful. And it's until you've done it, it's really hard to understand how much of an impact that can have. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure you had a big impact there. Now, did you actually, do you tend to facilitate those meetings, or do you tend to, say this is how they're run? How did that work with this client?
Well, what we do is we teach them the process, right, of the meeting, and we give them the agenda and the format and train them on how to run the meeting. I don't go in and run the meeting for them. I mean, I facilitate their planning sessions, but I don't go in and run their weekly meetings. Okay. But what I do is about once a quarter or as necessary, I'll go in and sit in on the meetings and give them some pointers on how to make the meeting better and so on and so forth. So I don't necessarily get in and facilitate their weekly meetings. However, I've been working with this client now for 4 or 5 years, and I still facilitate their quarterly planning meetings.
Right. Good. Okay. Very good. And then another thing that is very important for companies, repeatable business processes. And I believe you get involved with that a little bit. How does that work?
Absolutely. So here's my view of the process thing. The reason I even started doing this program is because I'm kind of a process guy, right? And most small business owners, mid-sized business owners, the process people, when you start talking about process, their eyes glaze over. Well, we take kind of a lightweight approach to the process thing. Really, what we want to do and what we're trying to achieve with our processes is not to get down to the 37 steps of doing accounts receivable, right? We're not going to get down to that level of our process. But what we are going to do is we're going to identify the top 10 to 12 processes in the company that cover 80% of the activities that go on in the company. And we're going to put together for each of those, 10 to 12 processes, a series of 5 or 6 steps, right? And so the nice thing about it is if you can define those processes and most importantly, get those processes followed by everyone in the organization, magic happens. And what do I mean by magic, right? Well, when you market in the same way all the time, when you sell in the same way all the time, when you manage your employees in the same way, when you deal with your customers and provide customer service in the same way, when you start doing everything in the same way and it's repeatable, a few things happen, right? Number one, every customer starts to have the same experience with your company as every other customer, right? And then you can bottle that, right? You can say, hey, here's the abundant experience, to use your company as an example, right? When you work with abundant, here's what you can expect, and by golly, you deliver it because everyone in the company is following the same process, all the way down from marketing, sales, operations, and even finance, the way that you invoice, the way that you deal with customers on the financial side. And so you can take that process and now start to market that process because no one else can deliver what you do. The other side benefit of it is that when you bring on new employees, it's easier to train because here's the way we do things at Abundant, right? Here's the way that we perform this role within the organization. And here's what the expectations are of this role. So one of the other things that we put in place is a scorecard for companies, right? So here's the way you're going to be measured going forward as you come to work for Abundant. So you get that consistency. You also, as you're defining these processes, you look at the handoffs between organizations and making sure that those handoffs are smooth and that one part of the organization is providing the right information to the person that they're handing it off to, so that it's seamless in the eyes of the customer. So process is a really important thing, and it's really what allows companies to scale in a big sort of way. Mm-hmm. Doing things consistently, not reinventing the wheel every time you do something.
Right. And I think we all see that every time not that we all go to McDonald's or Subway or, some of the fast food places, but when you do go in, we experience that. Every McDonald's I go in, I get the same experience. It may not be the world's greatest hamburger, but I know exactly what I'm going to get.
Well, I was just talking to someone last night, as a matter of fact, about that very thing, Carl. It was Chick-fil-A, right? Yeah. Right. If you go into Chick-fil-A and you say thank you, everyone at Chick-fil-A always says my pleasure. They don't say thank you; they say my pleasure. They've been obviously trained, right? They're all doing the same process. When you walk in, they greet you. When you leave, they tell you goodbye. They have a process for how they deliver your food. I mean, it's a very consistent experience every time you go into a Chick-fil-A, a McDonald's, or any of these other stores. And when you go into a store or a restaurant where they don't have a process, you notice it, right? You don't get the good, consistent service.
Right. Yeah. One time, you get 3 people greeting you, and the next time, nobody's around, or,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and it's the same way whether you're a manufacturing company or a distribution company, right? One of my clients, when we were discussing their values and articulating their values, one of the values that they identified was never make a customer wait or wonder, right? That's a cool value, because what that means is it's a manufacturing company, and what that means is when there's something has come up, maybe there's a material shortage, which a lot of companies are dealing with these days with the worldwide logistics challenges, right? They never want the customer to have to call and say, hey, where's my shipment? They proactively call the customer and say, hey, we just got notice that the shipment's been delayed, therefore our manufacturing is going to be delayed. And so, even if it's delivering bad news, they want to do it proactively as opposed to making the customer wait or wonder what's going on, right? And
mm-hmm. Right. Now, you mentioned training earlier. Now, is that something you see as kind of part of the procedures or process, or is there any particular thing you see with that?
Well, I mean, everybody should be trained, right? I consider myself a lifelong learner. I'm one of those one of those guys. I see all your business books behind you. If I were to turn off my virtual background, you'd see my library of books, but it's not as well organized as yours. So that's why I use a virtual background. So I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I believe that that companies must invest in developing their employees. There's an old saying in the HR world, the training world, right? Would you rather them? Because one of the complaints I get is, man, every time I train my employees, they leave me, and all that training expense and time, is really a benefit to their new employer, right? And so there's an old saying in the HR world that would you rather train them and have them leave, or not train them and have them stay? Right. And so I'm a believer in training and employee development. Getting back to the company that we were talking about a little bit earlier, this woman that felt like she didn't fit in the organization, she felt like that because of her customer experience and relationships and so on and so forth, she'd be a great. She'd like to be in the business development area as opposed to the operations area, and she'd never been in business development before, but so she ended up reporting to the leader who ran the business development organization and was great at it, right? And so learned how to do that role. And then when the head of business development ultimately left the company, she got promoted and is now the head of business development and is doing a great job. And so if you don't invest in your people, they're never going to grow. And if they don't grow, your company can't grow. So that's my view of training. It's critical.
Absolutely. Good. So it sounds like this particular employee, we've heard about a couple times, had, a real success in, some challenges initially, but eventually, some real success. So I think that in itself is an excellent kind of success story, if you will. From the company as a whole, were there any kind of other takeaways in terms of your feeling about how the whole process went?
Well, it's kind of funny because part of what we do with the EOS program is we say we work ourselves out of a job, right? So what we want to do is to help companies implement the program and ultimately to graduate and be able to run their quarterly planning meetings themselves, right? A lot of our clients will continue to have us run their annual planning meetings, but we really want to get clients to become more self-sufficient. And so this particular company said, okay, Rusty, I think we're ready to go, right? And so the CEO came to me and said, okay, we're going to do the next quarterly meeting on our own. I thought, great, right? And so he and I had a conversation, the day before the meeting, and so I kind of coached him on the process and here's what to look out for, and so on and so forth. And so they did their first quarterly planning meeting without me. And the next day he called me and said, "You're coming back." He said, I find that running the meeting means that I can't really participate in the meeting. And so, anyway, so, even though we try to get people to graduate, some clients stay with us for a long time, and good for me, right? But I still run their quarterly planning meetings and their annual planning meetings. So I've seen them grow really a lot over the last few years. They're now expanding into other markets within Texas. They've really focused in on the types of clients that are the best for them. They also, when I first started working with them, had a situation where one of their clients was a big part of their revenue. And so they had one, kind of monster client that was a big part of their revenue, and then some other clients that made up the rest of their revenue. And through this whole process of growth and development of their business development team, they've now gotten to a point where they're in much better shape. So if something were to happen with this big client, they'd still be okay, right? And so that's a big part of what we do, is to really look at where there are risks within the organizations and help them put a plan in place. I can't go in as, a facilitator and tell them what to do because I don't know their market. I work with manufacturing companies, distribution companies, professional services companies, even a couple of retail types of organizations, and they know their business better than I do. And so I'm not going to go in. I don't consider myself a consultant. I don't go in and tell them what to do or give them suggestions on what to do. I facilitate a process to help them. They have it in their heads. They know their market better than I do. They know their customers better than I do. They know their industry better than I do. So what I do is I facilitate them putting the plan in place and implement and help them implement the vision, the plans, and the process to be successful. They're the ones that do the hard work, right? So yeah.
Well, we certainly at Abundant, follow that same philosophy. We provide the tools for the companies to, be organized, to have those systems and processes to run their management effectively. But yeah, we're not here to provide, advice on, how to run your, we don't try and know your business better than you. We just try and provide the tools. So
yeah, and even more so. I mean, I have had clients that tried to hire me, right, to run their companies for you. I'm like, that's not me. I'm not the guy to come in and run your company for you. Number one, you probably can't afford me. Number two, I'm probably not the best person to run your company, right? I don't know your industry. I don't know your customers. You know those better than I do, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Well, this has been very insightful. I appreciate you sharing this story. This journey of with this customer. The challenges they've had initially. The processes they've gone through, and some of the successes in terms of growth and employees finding their their best roles. So I think that's fantastic. Really appreciate you sharing all that with me.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed the chat.
Absolutely. Excellent.